When we look back at history, we tend to remember the big stuff, right? The epic battles, the brilliant inventions. But what we forget is that history, it has a pretty dark sense of humor. And sometimes that humor is saved for the very, very end. So let's dive into some of the most unbelievable and honestly just absurd ways people have cashed in their chips.
So let me ask you a question. Seriously, how far would you be willing to go to prove that you're right about something? I mean, would you bet your life on it? For one man, this wasn't just some thought experiment. His confidence was, quite literally, his downfall.
So let's meet Garry Hoy. Picture this. It's 1993, we're in Toronto. Gary's this big shot corporate lawyer, and he has this peculiar party trick, one that he'd done a ton of times before. But on this particular day, his signature move would go horribly, fatally wrong.
Garry was a guy at the absolute top of his game. He was a partner at a major law firm, and everyone knew him as this super charismatic, personable guy. But the thing he was most famous for, it was his little demonstration of how strong his office windows were by literally body checking them. So on July 9th, he's giving a tour to a bunch of law students. And of course, he gets to his favorite part. He's on the 24th floor, bragging about how the glass is totally unbreakable. He takes a running start, and bam, slams right into it. He just bounces off, no problem. The students are amazed. But for Garry, once was never quite enough. And here's the wild part. To his credit, he was right. The glass itself, it didn't break. It didn't even crack. But on that second charge, the entire window frame popped right out of the building. Garry Hoy plunged 24 stories to his death right in front of everyone. Just a tragic, shocking lesson in, well, pushing your luck one too many times. Okay, so from a story that's all about fatal pride, we're going to switch gears to one about fatal purpose. This is the story of Jesse Lazier, a doctor whose scientific bravery was, let's just say, a bit reckless. But it was all aimed at solving the mystery of a really deadly disease, yellow fever. Now, the idea that mosquitoes were spreading yellow fever wasn't totally new. A Cuban doctor, Carlos Finlay, had actually suggested it 14 years earlier. But back then, the entire scientific community basically laughed him out of the room. They said his theory was just nonsense. So let's fast forward to 1900. Jesse Lazier decides, you know what? It's time to find out the truth once and for all. Lazier's plan was, well, it was terrifyingly simple. He went out, he found a mosquito that was carrying yellow fever, and he just let it bite him. On purpose. I mean, the logic was brutal, but it was inescapable. If the mosquito bites me and I get sick, then the theory's got to be true. And that is exactly what happened. Just a few days after that bite, Jesse Lazier died from yellow fever. But his death wasn't for nothing. His sacrifice was the absolute, undeniable proof that Carlos Finlay had been right all along. And it completely changed how we control the disease, saving countless lives ever since. It's incredible. One man's fatal experiment literally changed the course of medicine. All right, let's switch it up. We're going from science to spirits. We're talking about a name that pretty much everybody knows, Jack Daniels. But the legend of how the famous whiskey distiller died, well, it's just as memorable as his drink. Jack Daniel was a guy who was completely dedicated to his work. He learned how to make whiskey when he was just a boy from a master distiller named Nathan Green. Fun fact, he later hired Green as his first master distiller. This guy was all in on his business. No wife, no kids. He poured his whole life into that distillery and eventually passed it all on to his nephews. And this is where the legend really kicks in. You'd think his end would come from something dramatic, right? A distillery fire, maybe a bar fight. Nope. According to the story, his downfall was something way, way simpler. Just a single, frustrating moment of forgetfulness. So the story goes like this. Jack gets to work early one morning, he goes to open his safe, and he can't remember the combination. In a moment of pure, hot-headed anger, he does what, let's be honest, we've all wanted to do to a piece of tech that isn't working. He just hauls off and kicks it, as hard as he can. The thing is, a safe, well, it has, as the source puts it, buns of literal steel. The safe didn't move. Jack, on the other hand, broke his toe. So, that broken toe, it apparently got infected. The infection spread, and on October 9th, 1911, Jack Daniel died of blood poisoning. It's a fantastic story, isn't it? It's the perfect legend for a legendary brand. But you have to ask, is it actually true?
The company says so, but it still feels like one of those stories that's maybe just a little too good to be true. All right, for our last story, we've saved what might just be the most bizarre victory in the history of sports. This is about a guy named Frank Hayes. He was a stable boy, a horse trainer, and he had one simple dream. He just wanted to win a single horse race as a jockey. But the challenge in front of him was huge. To even qualify for this race back in 1923, Frank had to weigh under 130 pounds. The problem? He had to drop 12 pounds in just a few days. I mean, that is an insane and frankly a super dangerous thing to do to your body. But Frank was determined. He did it. He actually made the weight. But nobody, and I mean nobody, gave him a shot. He and his horse, a mare named Sweet Kiss, they were the ultimate long shots. The odds were 20-1 against them. And here's where the story just goes completely off the rails. As the race is getting to the end, Sweet Kiss just finds another gear, closes the distance, and crosses the finish line in first place. An incredible upset. The crowd is going absolutely nuts until they realize the jockey isn't moving. Frank Hayes had suffered a massive, fatal heart attack in the middle of the race, probably from the strain of losing all that weight so fast. This one line just sums it all up, and it is chilling. Frank Hayes did it. He achieved his dream. He won his race. And to this day, he is the only jockey in history to have won a race after he died. His poor horse, by the way, got nicknamed the Sweet Kiss of Death and, maybe understandably, never raced again. So you've got fatal pride, a fatal kick, a fatal victory. These stories are just impossible to forget. It really makes you wonder, when we look back centuries from now, what are the stories that really stick? Is it the tales of pure genius and triumph? Or is it these bizarre, unforgettable moments of pure, unadulterated absurdity?